There's a kind of power that doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention, doesn't seek control. It sits quietly, watches closely, and moves only when needed. That power is calmness. In a world full of noise, speed, and constant reaction, staying calm can feel like weakness. But in truth, it's the strongest thing you can be. As Josiah Gilbert Holland once said, calmness is the cradle of power, not chaos, not urgency, calmness. This video is a deep dive into why true strength starts with inner stillness. You'll learn how calm people make better decisions, handle conflict with grace, and lead without raising their voice. And more importantly, how you can become that person too. If you're tired of feeling overwhelmed, or if you're seeking more control, not over others, but over yourself, this is for you. Subscribe now, and let's begin your journey toward unshakable calm. You've probably met someone who stays quiet during an argument, not because they're calm, but because they're holding back a storm. Silence can be a mask. Calmness is not that. True calmness is not about shutting your mouth. It's about mastering your mind. It's not the absence of noise, but the presence of control. A calm person may speak or stay silent, but what defines them is the stillness beneath the surface. Many people confuse being passive with being peaceful. They think holding it in means holding it together, but repression is not calm. It's tension disguised. You can feel it in the jaw, the fists, the breath. It's a kind of silence that's ready to explode. Calmness, on the other hand, feels spacious. It doesn't react immediately because it doesn't have to. It's not holding itself back, it's standing on solid ground. This is where the real difference lies. Calmness doesn't need to control others because it has already mastered the self. A calm person is not afraid of silence or discomfort. They can stay still in a storm without pretending the storm isn't there. In difficult moments, calm people don't run. They don't lash out. And that pause is powerful. It's in that small space between what happens and how you react that real power lives. Calmness is also honest. It doesn't pretend to be unaffected. It sees clearly. It feels deeply, but it doesn't drown in emotions. Instead, it lets the feelings pass like waves, knowing that no storm lasts forever. Now ask yourself, how often do you confuse being quiet with being calm? How many times have you said nothing, but inside your thoughts were screaming? Calmness doesn't come from pretending. It comes from presence, from breathing through discomfort, from watching your own reactions like clouds drifting through the sky rather than becoming the storm. People often think they need to say something quickly to show confidence. But the calmest people don't rush to prove anything. Their strength shows in the space they hold, in the way they listen, in the peace they radiate, especially when everyone else is losing their balance. And here's the key: you don't need to be born with calmness. It's not a gift, it's a practice. You train it by noticing your triggers, slowing your breath, and allowing things to be messy without losing yourself in the mess. True calmness isn't rigid either. It's flexible. It adapts, it allows, and that's what makes it so resilient. While others are trying to control the situation, calm people focus on what they can control themselves. In a heated moment, most people want to win. Calm people want to understand. In an argument, most people want the last word. Calm people want clarity. In a crisis, most people panic. Calm people prepare. Calmness is not a luxury. It's a skill you build for the hard moments when emotions run high, when tempers flare, when the world feels like too much. You might not always get it right. You might still lose your cool sometimes. But each time you notice the space between reaction and response, and choose stillness instead of speed, you are building real power. And that power lasts. Because it's not built on control, it's built on awareness. The Stoics taught that we cannot control what happens, only how we respond. Epictetus, a former slave turned philosopher, said, "It's not events that disturb us, but our judgment about them." This idea is the backbone of calmness. A Stoic doesn't run from chaos. They observe it without letting it define them. They pause before reacting, not because they're afraid, but because they understand reacting blindly gives power away. Responding calmly reclaims it. In today's noisy world, we're taught to react instantly, to comment, to defend, to retaliate. But Stoicism reminds us that true strength is quiet. It lives in the gap between emotion and action. Crisis doesn't create character, it reveals it. When everything is falling apart, the calmest person in the room becomes the anchor. In moments of stress, most people narrow their focus. They panic, they obsess over the immediate threat. But calm people step back. They don't zoom in, they zoom out. And that simple shift in perspective changes everything. Think about a firefighter in an emergency. Smoke everywhere, people screaming, alarms blaring. The untrained mind would freeze or flail, but the experienced responder slows their breath, scans the room, and takes one deliberate step, not because they don't feel fear, but because they know that clarity only comes from calm. This principle applies far beyond emergencies. It shows up in business meetings, family conflicts, medical diagnoses. In every intense situation, there's one person who isn't flustered. And that person often becomes the decision maker, not by force, but by presence. Why? Because calmness expands awareness. It opens up the field of vision. While others are trapped in reaction, the calm mind is still gathering data. It sees options. It notices timing. It hears what isn't being said. In contrast, panic narrows your mind. It rushes you into poor decisions. It makes you impulsive, defensive, short-sighted. You don't think 2 steps ahead, you just react. That's why calmness is so powerful. It doesn't erase fear. It creates space around it. In that space, you find insight. And from that insight, you choose wisely. There's a reason military commanders, ER doctors, and airline pilots train to stay calm under pressure. It's not just for show, it's survival. Because your mind is useless when it's hijacked by adrenaline. A calm state lets you stay intelligent when everyone else shuts down. And here's what's fascinating. Calmness isn't the opposite of urgency. It's how you stay intelligent inside urgency. When something goes wrong, most people start yelling, rushing, scrambling. But yelling doesn't fix the problem. Rushing makes it worse. Calm people respond slower but more precisely. And in the end, that precision beats panic every time. There's also a deeper truth. Calmness is contagious. When one person stays centered in chaos, it influences everyone around them. It's as if their energy gives others permission to breathe. That's why calm leaders gain respect. Not because they dominate, but because they stabilize. Want to be that person? Start practicing in small moments. When you spill coffee, when someone cuts you off, when a coworker criticizes you. These are your training grounds. Each time you choose calm, you strengthen your ability to see clearly. You don't need to be fearless to be calm. You just need to slow the reaction. Instead of panicking, pause. Instead of rushing to fix, wait and observe. Even 5 seconds of stillness can shift your entire approach. Calmness gives you time, and time gives you power. Remember, the calmest person in the room is not detached. They are alert. They are aware. And they are waiting for the right move, not the loud one. In the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The Stoics believe that when chaos surrounds you, your duty is to stay grounded, not to control everything, but to control yourself. They taught that when storms come, it is not the wind you tame, it's your own sail. The wise person doesn't get tossed by every wave. They drop anchor within. Marcus faced wars, plagues, betrayal, but he returned to the same principle: keep your mind still. Because a still mind sees further. It notices the truth hidden beneath panic. It chooses from wisdom, not fear. When you train yourself to remain calm under pressure, you're not running from reality. You're meeting it on your terms. The moment you lose your temper, you lose your power. Anger feels powerful in the moment. It surges, it explodes, it demands attention, but it rarely leads to strength. More often, it leads to regret. Emotional outbursts are energy leaks. They drain your focus, damage your credibility, and sabotage your long-term goals. You may win the moment, but you lose the momentum. Why? Because when you act from emotion, you stop thinking clearly. Your brain is no longer working in full. It's reactive, not reflective. You speak without weighing your words. You act before considering consequences. And once the fire fades, you're left cleaning up the damage. Calmness, in contrast, channels emotion. It doesn't suppress it, but it filters it. When you're calm, you can feel angry without becoming anger. You can feel frustrated without being consumed by it. That's the difference between power and force. Force explodes. Power directs. Force reacts. Power responds. And every time you choose calm over chaos, you strengthen the muscle that helps you lead, influence, and move with intention. Let's get practical. In an argument, if you raise your voice, you give control to your opponent. If you lash out in frustration, you shift the focus away from the issue and onto your behavior. That weakens your position. Now imagine you stay calm. You breathe. You speak slowly. You ask a question instead of making an accusation. Suddenly, the dynamic changes. You're not just reacting, you're guiding the entire conversation. The most influential people in history didn't scream their way into power. They spoke with clarity. They moved with restraint. Their calm made others lean in. But here's the truth. Staying calm when emotions run high is hard. Especially when you feel attacked, misunderstood, or cornered. Your ego wants to fight back. Your pride wants the last word. Your mind races to defend itself. In those moments, calmness is a choice, a conscious interruption of your emotional autopilot. You must learn to pause, not because you don't care, but because you care about what comes next. It's not about being emotionless. It's about choosing your emotions like tools, not letting them swing you like weapons. And here's something else to consider. Emotional outbursts may feel good in the short term, but they often create long-term consequences. One angry message can destroy trust. One impulsive decision can cost you opportunities. One moment of shouting can echo for years. The calm person might not seem impressive in the heat of conflict, but they're the one people return to later when clarity matters. So how do you stop yourself from blowing up? Start by catching the early signs. Is your breathing shallow? Are your hands clenched? Is your voice getting faster? These are your signals. When they show up, slow down, say less, step away if needed. You don't always have to respond immediately. You can buy time. You can say, "Let me think about that," or "I need a moment." These are powerful phrases, not signs of weakness, but signs of discipline. Because the real power is not in how loud you speak, it's in how wisely you act. Seneca, the Roman Stoic, wrote, "Anger, an acid that does more harm to the vessel than to anything on which it is poured." The Stoics saw emotional outbursts as a form of inner slavery. When you explode in rage or despair, you surrender your rational mind. You become a puppet of your passions. Stoicism doesn't ask you to feel nothing. It asks you to master how you respond, to train yourself to pause, even when provoked, to speak with principle, not panic. Epictetus taught that no one can make you angry without your consent. You choose your inner state, and in choosing calm, you reclaim control. The calmer you are, the clearer you see, and the clearer you see, the stronger you become. Most people react instantly. Someone insults them, they snap back. A problem shows up, they rush to fix it. They live in a constant state of reaction like puppets pulled by invisible strings. But calmness breaks that cycle. It creates a space, a pause, a moment to choose rather than be controlled. In that pause lies everything, your freedom, your clarity, your power. When something triggers you, your brain floods with emotion. Adrenaline spikes. The urge to respond becomes overwhelming. But if you insert just a few seconds of stillness, if you can breathe before you act, you reclaim the wheel. That small space between trigger and response is where emotional intelligence is born. It's where wisdom has room to grow. Without it, you're just a reflex. With it, you're a thinker. People often say things like, "I couldn't help it, I was just so angry." But the truth is, they did have a choice. They just didn't see it, because they never built the habit of pausing. Calmness is not about denying your feelings. It's about slowing down your reaction so your values can speak before your impulses do. Here's an example. Imagine you get a harsh email from a coworker. Your instinct is to fire back. But if you pause even for 2 minutes, you'll likely realize that your first response would have made things worse. That space saved you from damaging your reputation. Or think of a parent snapping at their child out of stress. The damage is done in seconds. But if the parent had paused, taken a breath, they might have spoken with kindness instead of frustration. That space could have preserved trust. It's in the pause that character is formed. Anyone can be kind when it's easy, but those who pause in the heat of the moment are building something stronger: self-control. Pausing also helps you detect the deeper story. Often your anger isn't really about the moment. It's about something buried underneath fear, insecurity, exhaustion. Without space, you don't see that. You just explode. But when you slow down, you can ask yourself, what's really going on here? Why did this trigger me so deeply? What do I need right now that I'm not giving myself? This self-inquiry turns emotional reactions into self-awareness, and self-awareness turns chaos into growth. The truth is, you can't stop triggers from coming. Life will always test you, but you can train yourself to respond with space, and that space protects your relationships, your goals, your peace. Building that pause takes practice. Start small. When someone says something annoying, pause before replying. When you feel overwhelmed, step away from the noise. When your body tenses, notice it. These tiny habits compound. Over time, the pause becomes your natural response. Not because you're suppressing emotion, but because you've trained your awareness to lead. It's not about freezing. It's about choosing. That's the power of calm. It doesn't block the storm. It gives you a place to stand inside it. The Stoics taught the art of pausing long before psychology gave it a name. Epictetus said, "It's not things that upset us, but our judgments about them." This means the space between event and reaction is where interpretation happens and where peace begins. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor philosopher, reminded himself daily, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke. That's Stoic wisdom in action. Life doesn't wait, but you can. You can choose not to react immediately. You can sit in the discomfort without becoming it. The Stoics weren't cold, they were composed. They believed true power was shown not in how quickly you strike, but in how clearly you choose. Control is seductive. We often think power means being able to make others behave, agree, or obey. But real power doesn't come from managing others. It comes from mastering yourself. Calmness is not about dominating a situation. It's about not letting the situation dominate you. The person who remains calm under pressure is not weak. They're not passive. They're simply not driven by the need to control what they cannot. And that is strength of the highest kind. When you try to control others, what they think, say, or do, you're playing a losing game. People are unpredictable. Emotions shift. Reactions vary. The more you cling to control, the more frustrated you become. But when you shift your focus inward, when you ask, what can I control in myself right now? You step into power. You move from force to influence, from chaos to clarity. Self-mastery doesn't mean you suppress your feelings. It means you guide them. You don't silence your anger, you sit with it. You don't pretend you're not hurt. You process it with grace. Calm people aren't emotionless. They're emotionally intelligent. And because they don't need to control others to feel safe, they operate with less fear. They don't overreact to criticism. They don't chase validation. And they don't waste energy trying to change things that are outside their reach. Think of the strongest leaders you know. Not the loudest, not the most demanding, but the most composed. The ones who speak softly and move deliberately. Their presence commands respect not through force, but through self-possession. That's calmness. That's power without noise. It's tempting to believe that raising your voice gives you authority, or that interrupting someone proves you're strong. But these are signs of insecurity, not strength. They reveal an inner need to be seen, not a true sense of control. When you're calm, you're not chasing control, you're embodying it. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to make everyone like you. You stay grounded in your values and let others be as they are. That's the kind of strength people trust. This mindset is also freeing. Once you realize that you can't control how others behave, but you can always control how you show up, you stop wasting energy on things that drain you. You stop fixing everyone. You stop proving yourself. You stop reacting to every trigger. Instead, you respond from a centered place, which makes your words more thoughtful and your actions more effective. Self-mastery is a daily practice. It's built by observing your thoughts, questioning your impulses, and aligning your behavior with your deeper values. It takes time, but each time you choose calm over chaos, you reinforce it. And over time, people will notice. They'll trust you in tense moments. They'll turn to you when things fall apart. Not because you control them, but because you control yourself when it matters most. The Stoics made one thing clear. We cannot control others. We can only control ourselves. Epictetus put it simply, some things are up to us, and some things are not. That single insight is the foundation of Stoic calm. Instead of trying to change the world, the Stoic trains their mind. When insulted, they don't retaliate. When misunderstood, they don't chase approval. When challenged, they don't flinch. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that the opinions and actions of others are not his responsibility. His only task was to act with integrity, courage, and reason, no matter how the world behaved. This isn't indifference, it's discipline. In any group, one person sets the tone. Not always the loudest, not the one in charge. Often it's the calmest. Calmness carries authority. It signals safety. When someone enters a room and stays composed, others naturally adjust to match their energy. That's influence without force. Think of a heated meeting where voices are rising. One person doesn't join the noise. They sit still, breathe slowly, and speak softly, but with precision. That person doesn't just react. They guide the room back to balance, not with volume, but with presence. This is the hidden power of calmness. It regulates the emotional temperature of a space. When everyone is tense, one grounded person can shift the mood. Their calm spreads. Their silence says more than shouting ever could. It invites others to pause, to listen, to reflect. Calmness is disarming, not because it attacks, but because it refuses to escalate. This works not just in professional settings, but in everyday life. Arguments with loved ones, stressful family dinners, customer service encounters. The person who stays calm becomes the emotional thermostat. They don't absorb the tension, they transform it. But this isn't easy. It requires discipline. When someone attacks you verbally, your instinct is to defend. When someone raises their voice, you want to match it. That's natural. But the moment you mirror their chaos, you give them control. Staying calm means you stay in control of you, and that's exactly what influences others. Here's the paradox. Calmness looks passive, but it's active leadership. It's a form of emotional leadership rooted not in domination, but in regulation. When you speak calmly, people listen differently. Your words carry more weight. You're not shouting to be heard. You're grounded enough that people want to hear you. And in conflict, that calmness becomes a stabilizer. This doesn't mean you avoid hard truths. You can be calm and firm, calm and assertive, calm and honest. In fact, calmness gives you the clarity to say difficult things well without inflaming the situation. Calmness is a soft power, but it's incredibly effective. Over time, people begin to trust you more, not because you're always right, but because you're steady. And in an unstable world, that steadiness is rare. So how do you develop this tone-setting calmness? Start by slowing down your pace. Speak slower, breathe deeper, notice your posture. In any stressful moment, check your body first. Are your shoulders tight? Jaw clenched, hands fidgeting? These are cues. When you soften them, your presence shifts. You don't have to dominate the room. Just hold your ground with stillness, with quiet certainty. That alone can change the entire dynamic. And remember, calmness is not a performance. It's not about looking in control, it's about being in control. Starting with your nervous system. When you regulate yourself, you regulate the room. The Stoics believed that composure was one of the highest virtues, not because it looked impressive, but because it showed mastery of the self. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." This is emotional leadership in Stoic form. You don't control others by shouting louder. You lead by standing still when others waver. The Stoic doesn't panic with the crowd. They don't react with the mob. They observe, they breathe, and in doing so, they change the tone without saying much at all. The quality of your decisions depends on the quality of your mind at the moment you make them. When you're anxious, overwhelmed, or emotionally triggered, your thinking narrows. You default to instinct, not insight. You choose what feels urgent, not what's actually wise. In short, a stressed mind makes sloppy decisions. That's why calmness isn't just about peace. It's a critical tool for clarity. When you're calm, your brain has space to assess, compare, weigh consequences. You're not rushing to escape discomfort, you're responding with intention. The nervous system settles, the emotional fog clears, and suddenly your options appear in full view. Think back to a time when you made a decision out of panic. Maybe you quit something too soon, said something you didn't mean, or agreed to something you later regretted. At the time it felt necessary, but looking back you can probably see the distortion. You weren't thinking, you were escaping. Calmness reverses that impulse. It gives you the patience to sit with uncertainty, the strength to delay reaction, and the clarity to see the bigger picture. People often associate decisiveness with speed, but the best decisions aren't always the fastest. They're the ones made with a clear head and steady hand. Calm people may take longer to decide, but their choices often endure because they come from reflection, not reactivity. This is especially important during conflict crisis or emotional tension. In those moments, every voice in your head will scream for immediate action. That's when you must resist the urge to do something now. Often doing nothing for a short while leads to better action later. In leadership, this is even more essential. Teams look to their leaders for direction. If the leader is reactive, it creates ripple effects of poor judgment. But a calm leader absorbs uncertainty and responds with clarity, even if they don't have all the answers yet. That presence alone stabilizes others. In relationships, calm decisions prevent damage. Instead of arguing in anger, you step back. Instead of sending a bitter message, you pause. These tiny moments of restraint save trust, protect dignity, and create space for understanding. So how do you access calm when your mind is sunning? Start with your breath. It's the fastest way to signal safety to your brain. Slow, deep breaths shift your nervous system out of fight or flight and into presence. Then ask better questions. What's really happening here? What would a wiser version of me do right now? These questions interrupt the emotional spiral and activate your thinking brain. Finally, don't be afraid to delay a decision. Say, "Let me sleep on this," or "I'll get back to you tomorrow." Buying time is not indecision, it's discipline. Because the truth is, no good decision ever came from panic, and no wise action ever came from desperation. The Stoics knew that a disturbed mind could not produce sound judgment. That's why calmness was not a luxury, it was a duty. Seneca wrote, "No man was ever wise by chance." Wisdom for the Stoics came from choosing calmness in the face of emotional storms. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and Stoic, led an empire through war plague and betrayal. But in his private writings, he reminded himself daily, if you are troubled, it is not events themselves that disturb you, but your judgment about them. To the Stoic, a clear mind is a moral requirement. It's how you act justly, think fairly, and live with purpose. You cannot see truth through the lens of fear or fury. You must wait for the waters to settle. Life won't always go your way. People will disappoint you. Plans will fall apart. Things you worked hard for will slip through your fingers. And in those moments you face a choice, panic or pause. Fight what you can't control or accept what is. This is where calmness becomes a sign of maturity. When you're younger or less experienced, you try to fix everything. You raise your voice to be heard, argue to prove a point, scramble to regain control. But as you grow, you realize some things are simply not yours to fix. Maturity means knowing the difference between what needs your energy and what needs your acceptance. It's not apathy, it's wisdom. You can care deeply and still remain calm. You can be invested without being consumed. You can stand in chaos and still choose not to react emotionally. Because the truth is, no amount of anxiety ever fixed a future. No amount of overthinking ever prevented a loss. And no amount of panic has ever made anyone stronger. Calmness in the face of uncertainty is not weakness, it's evolution. It's a learned strength. A decision to stop giving away your peace to things you can't control. This doesn't mean you don't act when action is needed. It means you act from a place of stability, not desperation. When life goes off track, your first job is to steady yourself, not the world. Because if your mind collapses, everything else does too. This is especially hard when the stakes are personal. A failing relationship, a sick loved one, a job you're afraid of losing. These are the moments where calmness seems almost impossible. But these are also the moments where it becomes most necessary. Calmness doesn't take away the pain, but it allows you to move through it with clarity and dignity. It stops you from making emotional decisions that add more damage. It helps you communicate with softness instead of blame. It allows you to focus on what you can do, rather than obsessing over what you can't. And most importantly, calmness creates space for healing, for reflection, for adaptation. When you stop fighting reality, you start working with it. This is the kind of calm that comes from experience, from failing learning and realizing that control is often an illusion and peace is something you build inside. Because mature calmness doesn't mean you gave up. It means you've grown up. The Stoics taught that peace is found not in controlling events, but in controlling our relationship to them. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." This is not resignation, it's mental clarity. To the Stoic, maturity meant choosing calm in the face of chaos. They believed that the wise person accepts fate without complaint and acts with virtue regardless of outcome. Marcus Aurelius lived through plagues, wars, and betrayal. Yet in his journal, he reminded himself daily to remain calm, not because the world was easy, but because inner peace was his responsibility. So when the world disappoints you, don't lose yourself in it. Breathe. Return to the only thing you own, your response. Because maturity is not measured by how much you control, but by how gracefully you move through what you cannot. Your energy is limited. Each day you wake up with a finite amount of attention, patience, and mental strength. The way you spend that energy defines your outcomes, your relationships, and your peace of mind. This is why calmness matters not just emotionally, but practically. Calmness is how you conserve your energy for what truly deserves it. When you're reactive, you leak energy. You argue with people who won't change. You replay conversations in your head. You stress over things outside your control. And by the end of the day, you're drained not because life was too hard, but because your focus was too scattered. Calmness stops that leak. It teaches you to pause before reacting, to observe before speaking, and to choose what's worth your emotional investment. Not every comment needs a response. Not every conflict needs your participation. Not every slight deserves your outrage. This is not about avoiding life. It's about being selective, strategic, intentional. Think about the last time you got into a pointless argument. Maybe it was online. Maybe it was with a coworker. At the time, it felt important. But afterward, did it really change anything? Or did it just leave you tired, irritated, and unfocused? That's what emotional waste looks like. A calm person learns to ask, is this worth my energy? Will this matter tomorrow? Most of the time, the answer is no. And in that no, they find freedom. They don't suppress their feelings. They direct them. They don't shut down. They step back. They protect their energy like a scarce resource because they know it fuels everything else. Creativity, presence, decision-making, even joy. This is especially important in the age of constant noise. Social media, news, opinions, expectations, they all fight for your attention. Without calmness, you'll react to everything. With it, you can filter out the noise and focus on what matters. Calmness is like a shield. It doesn't block out the world, but it keeps the unimportant from piercing your inner state. You don't need to respond to every provocation. Sometimes silence is stronger. Sometimes walking away is wiser. Sometimes doing nothing is the most powerful move you can make. Calmness doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring more selectively, choosing where your energy flows and who gets to receive it. And the more you practice this, the more energy you'll have for what truly deserves you, your purpose, your passions, your peace. The Stoics valued energy as a form of personal integrity. They believed that wasting it on uncontrollable things weakened your spirit. Seneca said, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than necessary." In other words, don't spend your energy on imagined battles, unnecessary conflicts, or emotions that lead nowhere. To a Stoic, calmness was a filter. It separated what was meaningful from what was distracting. It protected the self from emotional exhaustion. Epictetus advised his students, when someone provokes you, remember that it's not their action that disturbs you, but your judgment of it. This simple truth frees your mind. You don't have to carry every insult, every offense, every disappointment. You can let it pass. So guard your energy. Choose your responses carefully. Be calm, not because you're passive, but because you're intentional. Because every ounce of energy you save through calmness becomes fuel for something far more valuable, your purpose. Creativity doesn't bloom in chaos. Intuition doesn't speak through noise. They both require one essential condition: inner stillness. Calmness isn't just about keeping your emotions in check. It's about opening up mental space. And in that space, something powerful happens. You begin to hear what you usually ignore: your deeper thoughts, your quiet instincts, your original ideas. When your mind is constantly reacting, rushing, judging, worrying, there's no room for insight. You're just surviving. But when you slow down, when you stop trying to control every outcome, your mind becomes receptive. It begins to connect ideas, notice subtle details, and sense what logic alone can't explain. Think about when your best ideas come to you. Rarely in meetings, rarely in arguments. Usually they appear in the shower, during a walk, or in a quiet moment alone. Why? Because calmness allows access to deeper mental layers. Layers that don't shout, but whisper. That's how intuition works. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's often the softest voice in the room, and unless you're calm, you'll miss it. Calmness is also what allows you to enter flow, that creative state where time fades and you're fully immersed in what you're doing. Whether you're writing, designing, building, or solving a problem, flow only arrives when your mind feels ripe and focused. But if you're anxious, rushed, or emotionally scattered, the door to creativity slams shut. You're too busy reacting to reach anything original. Calmness is not passive, it's productive. It's the starting point of real thinking, the kind that leads to innovation, clarity, and truth. That's why great thinkers and artists often retreat to silence. They understand that deep work doesn't come from forcing thoughts. It comes from listening inward, and calmness makes that possible. In daily life, this means giving yourself mental space, not filling every minute with input, podcasts, notifications, conversations. Instead, carving out quiet walks without headphones, mornings without rushing, evenings without screens. You need empty space in your mind if you want something meaningful to emerge. This also applies to decision-making. A calm mind hears more than facts. It picks up patterns, tones, hesitations. It reads between the lines. It sees through surface logic and feels what's missing. Intuition is not irrational. It's the wisdom of experience quieted into a feeling, and you need calmness to interpret it correctly. Without calmness, you misread your gut. You mistake fear for instinct. You confuse anxiety with warning. But when you're calm, you can tell the difference. You can hear the true signal beneath the noise. So, if you want to be more creative, more intuitive, more insightful, don't push harder. Be still more often. Create calm within, and ideas will come to you naturally, not because you chase them, but because you've made space for them to arrive. The Stoics didn't talk about creativity in modern terms, but they understood inner clarity deeply. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the Roman Empire, journaled in silence. He used quiet to reflect, to untangle thoughts, and to see beyond surface emotions. His meditations were born not from chaos but from calm. Seneca too wrote in solitude. He believed that a mind constantly disturbed cannot think freely. He warned that mental clutter drowns out wisdom. To the Stoic, calmness wasn't a luxury. It was a condition for insight. They knew that truth rises only in still water, never in a storm. In our time, creativity is prized, but we forget that it requires space, quiet, and presence. The Stoic reminds us, if you want to hear your deeper wisdom, stop chasing stimulation. In calmness, you don't just survive. You create, understand, and come alive. No one is born calm. Calmness is not a personality trait. It's a skill just like strength, discipline, or focus, and it's developed through practice. You don't become calm by accident. You become calm by choosing it repeatedly, especially when it's hardest. Most people think calmness means being naturally chill, like someone who never gets upset. But true calm people feel everything: anger, fear, anxiety, frustration. The difference is that they've trained themselves to pause, to observe, and to respond instead of react. This training starts in small, ordinary moments. When you're stuck in traffic, when someone interrupts you, when plans get cancelled last minute. These are not random annoyances, they're opportunities to build calmness. Each time you resist the urge to snap, complain, or rush, you're rewiring your nervous system. You're teaching your body that it doesn't need to fight everything. You're showing your mind that it can handle discomfort without losing control. Over time, calmness becomes your default, not because life is easier, but because you've become stronger. This doesn't mean perfection. Everyone loses their temper sometimes. Everyone slips. The difference is whether you bounce back with awareness or spiral deeper into reactivity. The more you train, the faster your recovery. You can also build calmness through deliberate habits. Meditation, breathwork, journaling, even simple stillness. These aren't trends, they're tools. Each of them helps you slow down, witness your mind, and create space between stimulus and response. And just like muscles, the more you train calmness, the more accessible it becomes under pressure. What used to trigger you now rolls off. What once caused panic now meets a steady breath. Calmness also grows when you stop overcommitting. Say no to things that drain you. Set boundaries that protect your peace. Get enough sleep. Eat food that nourishes your system. These are not luxuries, they are pillars of inner stability. Without them, you're constantly running on fumes, making emotional decisions simply because you're exhausted. Calmness is not about denying emotion. It's about creating enough space to work with emotions skillfully. That takes daily practice, not when everything is peaceful, but especially when it isn't. So don't say, I'm just not a calm person. Say, I'm becoming a calmer person, and then prove it with practice, presence, and patience. Every day gives you a chance to train. Take it. The Stoics believed that calmness was a form of mastery, and mastery could be cultivated. Seneca wrote, "No man is born wise. Wisdom is the reward of time and effort. In the same way, no one is born calm. Calmness is the reward of repetition, choosing awareness over impulse again and again." Epictetus reminded his students that the goal of philosophy was practice, not theory. He said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." The Stoic path was not about suppressing emotion, but about training the mind to remain steady, no matter the storm. Each day, each inconvenience, each frustration, these were part of the curriculum. So if you lose your cool, don't give up. Reflect, learn, begin again. You don't have to be perfect, you only have to be committed. Because calmness is not who you are, it's what you practice. And what you practice, you become. Calmness isn't only about protecting yourself, it's also a gift you give to others. When you walk into a room calm, people feel it. They may not say it, but something in them softens. Your presence becomes a mirror reflecting steadiness, grounding the chaos around you. You don't need to offer advice. You don't need to fix anyone. Your calmness alone becomes a quiet signal. It's okay to slow down here. You're safe. You don't have to perform. That's the hidden power of inner peace. It's contagious. In a world filled with nervous energy, reactive conversations, and unspoken stress, calmness becomes rare. And what is rare becomes magnetic. Think about the people you trust most. Chances are they aren't the loudest. They're the ones who don't panic when you break down. The ones who don't judge when you struggle. The ones who make you feel grounded just by being present. They hold space. And that's what you do when you become calm, not distant, but anchored. People sense they can fall apart in your presence and not be met with more noise. They can speak slowly, breathe deeply, be real. This is leadership at its highest form, not by control, but by containment. You become a container that holds tension without spreading it. A space where others can settle, reflect, and return to themselves. Even in relationships, calmness is healing. Instead of escalating, you de-escalate. Instead of defending, you listen. You create safety, which is the foundation for trust and connection. This doesn't mean you avoid hard conversations or suppress your feelings. It means you bring them forward with steadiness, with timing, with care. And because you're calm, your message lands. People can actually hear you because they don't feel attacked. This ripple effect can't be faked. It comes only from doing the inner work, from building calm, not as a strategy, but as a state of being. And when you become that person, the world around you changes. Not because you forced it, but because your calmness challenged others to meet you there. In the end, this is what makes calmness so powerful. It doesn't just protect your peace, it becomes a pathway for others to find theirs. The Stoics believed that the calm mind serves not just the self, but the whole. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Instead of spreading harm, the Stoic contains it. Instead of reflecting chaos, he reflects clarity. This inner posture becomes service. It keeps conflict from escalating. It invites others to rise above their own reactions. It becomes a moral anchor in a turbulent world. The Stoic doesn't seek to impress, but to embody. Their calmness isn't decoration, it's discipline, it's generosity. Seneca said, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness." And what is calmness, if not a form of deep, unspoken kindness? A kindness that says, "I will not add fire to your fire. I will be the still water instead." So as you walk through the world, remember your calm might be the exact medicine someone else didn't know they needed. Calmness is not weakness. It's not avoidance. It's not silence for the sake of silence. It is the highest form of self-mastery. Throughout this journey, you've seen that calmness is not something you're born with. It's something you train. You've learned that calmness is what protects your energy, sharpens your decisions, expands your awareness, and gives space for creativity, intuition, and healing. It anchors your relationships, defines your leadership, and turns your presence into a source of safety for others. In a loud world, calmness is a form of rebellion. You may not always get it right. That's okay. What matters is that you return to it again and again, because every time you choose calm, you become more yourself.